I sit at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, trying not to disturb the silence. It's early morning, the sun is just beginning to break through the curtains, but the kitchen is dim and quiet. Molly stands at the sink with her back to me, slowly stirring a mug with a spoon. There's no sound except the ticking of the wall clock and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Our 4-year-old son, Jamie, is still asleep in his room, so we speak in whispers, or rather, barely speak. I sip my cold coffee and clear my throat. Molly and I usually chat in the morning about small things, how each other slept, what Jamie dreamed about, who's driving him to preschool today. But today, Molly is silent. Her shoulders are tense, and I notice the glistening water droplets on the plates in the sink. She's washing dishes that are already clean just to keep her hands occupied. "Good morning," I finally say, trying to keep my voice soft. In the silence, my whisper seems loud, out of place. Molly flinches slightly, as if I've brought her out of her deep thoughts. She glances over her shoulder, the corners of her lips barely smiling. "Hi," she answers just as quietly and looks away again. I find myself waiting for her to continue, but she's silent. My palms are sweaty, and I grip my mug tighter. I remember how just a year ago, mornings in our house would begin with cheerful chatter and laughter. Now, it's as if a bell of silence hangs over the kitchen table, muffling every word. Anxiety is growing inside. In recent weeks, a silence has settled between us. Not the calm, comfortable silence when loved ones are happy without words, but a tense, echoing emptiness. I don't know what caused it. Perhaps it's my evenings spent studying or Molly's exhaustion from the endless worries of home and child. We are both busy. I am a sophomore in college, working part-time at a warehouse in the evenings, and she is hanging out with Jamie all day. By evening, we are exhausted, and there is neither time nor energy left for conversation. But before, despite our fatigue, we could always talk about everything, even if only in a whisper, so as not to wake our son. Now, the silence between us seems insurmountable. Molly places her mug on the table next to me and sits down across from me. Her light brown hair is pulled back into a loose ponytail, and there are shadows under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept well again. I want to ask if everything is okay, but I'm afraid to hear the answer. We exchanged a quick glance. Something flashes in her green eyes, but is quickly hidden behind lowered lashes. Guilt? Sadness? I don't have time to figure it out. "How did you sleep?" I ask finally, just to fill the ringing pause. "It's fine," she answers quietly, without looking up. The spoon in her mug clanks loudly against the rim. She's fiddling with it in her hands, clearly nervous. The wall clock ticks away the seconds behind us. The silence becomes almost palpable. I look down at my notebook, lying next to my mug. Yesterday, in English class, the professor assigned me an essay on a free topic. At the time, I was happy about such creative freedom. There was so much I could tell about my life. But now, the blank page only makes me more insecure. My head is empty, not a single worthwhile thought. I look from the notebook to Molly. Maybe I should write about our family, about what it's like to be a 30-year-old student with a wife and child. This topic is close to me, but I doubt the professor is expecting such frankness. Molly notices my movement and, following my gaze, nods towards the notebook. "An assignment? An essay?" Her voice is quiet, cautious. "Yeah, on a free topic," I answer. I try to smile, but my face is like stone. I haven't figured out what to write about yet. "You always have something to say, Alex," she says softly, looking away toward the window. I don't know what she means. I used to be talkative. I loved to tell stories about the Navy or work. Lately, it's as if I've forgotten how to speak. Trying to diffuse the situation, I say with deliberate lightness, "Maybe I'll write about how Jamie learned to ride a bike, or about night shifts at the warehouse." I grin, but the joke comes out flat. Molly doesn't react, just clasps her hands in her lap. There is another long pause. I finish my coffee. It is completely cold, bitter. My throat is sore from unspoken words. I want to reach across the table, touch her palm, ask where our former closeness has gone. But I do not dare. Instead, I grit my teeth and stand up. It's time to wake Jamie. I say quietly. I'll take him today, okay? Molly just nods, still not looking at me. I walk out of the kitchen, and the silence follows me. The silence that has settled between us like an unwanted guest that you don't know how to get rid of. I start the old pickup and pull away, heading first to preschool and then to college. Molly is staying home. She doesn't have to go to work today. There's soft music playing in the car, but I can barely hear it, my mind returning to that morning scene in the kitchen. The oppressive silence has settled inside, like a lump in my throat. I want to talk, but there's no one to talk to. Jamie is humming a cartoon song under his breath in the back seat, his legs swinging carelessly. I sneak a look at him in the rearview mirror and try to smile. He's only 4, and he doesn't notice anything yet. For him, the morning is normal. Dad will drop him off. Mom will wave at the door. But I feel like something important has cracked and is barely hanging on by an honest word. After dropping my son off at preschool and hugging him goodbye, I got back in the car. There are still 20 minutes until the first period, and there is no need to rush. I drive the familiar route to downtown Portland. The gray sky hangs low. It looks like it will definitely rain today. The windshield wipers squeak on the dry glass, leaving half circles. This picture gray sky, waiting for rain, reminds me of other gray mornings, only there were no cars and no city noise. A few years ago, I would greet each morning on the open sea. My service in the Navy taught me to appreciate short moments of calm. The pre-dawn silence on the ocean is special. You stand on the deck during watch, all around is darkness, only the stars and the red lights of the instruments. It is so quiet that you can hear the ship cutting through the water. I remember once standing on the bow of a destroyer and listening to the splash of the waves against the side. Below, behind the steel bulkhead, my colleagues were dozing, and I had to stay on duty until dawn. That silence was calm, enveloping, like a warm blanket. And at the same time, wary any rustle could mean alarm. That was exactly what happened that time. The silence was suddenly broken by a sharp alarm bell, a drill. I shuddered then, my heart sank. Then everything started moving. The stamping of feet on the deck, commands over the loudspeaker, feverish bustle. We rushed around the compartments, practicing the drill. An hour later, sweat poured into my eyes, my lungs burned from running up the stairs, and I thought how suddenly calm turns into chaos. But the one that I remember most vividly is another incident, also connected with the calm before the storm. It happened in my last year of service. We were sailing somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. There had been a storm the day before, but in the morning the waves had died down and there was a calm. I went out on deck after breakfast, wanting some fresh air. The sky was still overcast. After the night storm, the air was damp. The sailors had unwound the mooring lines and were checking the life-saving equipment. I was helping the younger guys wind the ropes. I remember holding a thick sea rope in my hands, still damp, rough, slippery from the salt. We wound it into rings, and it became a heavy loop, turn after turn. At one point, the ship rocked on the residual wave, and the wet rope jerked in my hands. One of the young sailors, Rico, stumbled on the slippery deck and fell, and at that very moment the tight loop of the rope broke loose from the railing and slid straight onto his shoulder and neck. I realized with a glance that another second and the noose would tighten around his throat or throw the guy overboard. Without thinking, I dropped the end I was pulling and rushed to Rico. Grabbing the rough rope with my hands, I literally stopped the tight sliding knot with my bare fingers, while 2 other sailors pulled the victim aside. The rope burned my palms, but I managed to hold on to it. Another moment, and the noose loosened. Rico got off with a couple of bruises and shock. And then I spent a long time coming to my senses, sitting on a box of tools. Silence reigned around us again, only the splash of the waves and the stifled breathing of the frightened children. I unclenched my fingers, they were shaking and humming with pain. The rope had almost rubbed off my skin. But inside, I felt a strange calm. We had managed, and everything had ended well. That sea noose could have killed a man, but we stopped it. I thought then that life sometimes tightens a noose around your throat in the same way, unexpectedly, abruptly. The main thing is to find the strength and support in time to break it. In the Navy, there was always a team nearby, a comrade's shoulder. Now, sitting in a car at a traffic light in rainy Portland, I feel alone before an approaching storm. Something is happening to my family that I do not fully understand, and there is no alarm siren, no team that will come running to help. There is only an anxious silence around. A long honk sounds behind me. I didn't notice the light had turned green. The car behind me honks impatiently. I blink, coming back from my reverie, and step on the gas. The windshield wipers disperse the first heavy drops of rain. A melody plays softly on the radio. I can't even make out the words. I push thoughts of the past away and try to focus on the present. I have 3 classes today, then I have to pick up Jamie, cook dinner. And again, that lump in my throat, I'll have to be back in our quiet kitchen. God knows, I'd rather have a real storm, just to break the silence. After class, I wander around campus, trying not to rush home. The rain has stopped, and the lights of the university buildings reflect on the wet pavement. Students are crowded near the library exit. Some are laughing, talking. I feel like an outsider among these young kids. I'm 31, I have a family, and they are carefreely discussing parties. Usually, I don't have an insecurity about my age. There are plenty of older students like me at Portland State. But today, I don't feel like talking to anyone. I wander under the canopy of trees growing along the campus alley, wondering how we got here in the first place. 2 years ago, I worked as a loader in a small town in the east of the state. I left the army at 26. I decided that I had enough of the nomadic life. I returned home, where Molly was waiting for me at that time, already a bride. We registered almost immediately and did not want to waste time. I got a job at a warehouse, first as a loader, then as a foreman. The work is hard, but stable. A year later, Jamie was born. Life was not easy for us, but we were friendly. In the evenings, I returned tired, but happy. My wife and our baby were waiting for me at home. We rented a tiny house, made ends meet, but we had a dream to buy our own home someday to give our son a good future. That's when the idea of going to school came to me. There wasn't much growth to be had at the warehouse, and my back was starting to hurt from all the boxes I had to carry. I suddenly had a clear picture of being broke at 40, with no education, no way to advance. One night, after I'd put Jamie to bed, I sat with Molly on the porch of our little house. I remember the moonlight shining on her face. She asked me why I looked so gloomy. I took the plunge and told her everything I had been thinking, that I wanted to go to school, get a degree, get a better job. I told her it would be easier for her and our son if I got out of manual labor, and that maybe we'd have to move to a place where there was a college. I expected doubts after all. I'm almost 30. How can I study with boys? But Molly surprised me. She smiled and said, "Alex, I believe in you." She supported my idea with enthusiasm, even more than I believed myself. A couple of months later, I quit. We packed our things and moved to Portland, the closest large university with suitable programs. Molly then left her job as a cashier in a store, which she found after maternity leave, and moved with me, although her family and friends remained in her hometown. We rented a 2-room apartment not far from campus, the same one where we live now. It was not so great. An old building, thin walls and windows, drafts in the winter, noisy neighbors. But we looked at everything through rose-colored glasses back then. I remember our first night in Portland. We had put the last of our boxes down and were sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by a mess of stuff. Jamie was 2 years old, crawling around and playing with the pots and pans, banging them like drums. Molly and I were eating pizza out of a cardboard box and drinking cheap champagne out of plastic cups, celebrating our housewarming. She was laughing, a little tipsy, happy, her eyes shining with hope. I took her hand and said, "I promise, this is the beginning of our new, better life." I remember her pressing herself against me and whispering, "I believe you." We kissed on the cold floor of an unfamiliar apartment, surrounded by scattered boxes, and I was full of confidence that everything would work out, that all the difficulties were temporary, that love and perseverance would lead us where we needed to go. Now, 2 years later, I wander around the university courtyard and feel bitterness on my lips, remembering those promises. Yes, I try my best. Lectures in the morning, library in the afternoon. In the evening, I run to work at the logistics center to unload trucks. I come home closer to midnight, exhausted. Molly is also having a hard time. She spends the whole day with a child and also works from home. She takes orders to design postcards. She is a creative person. Money flows through our fingers. Rent in the city is expensive. A decent part of the budget goes to the kindergarten. Textbooks cost a lot of money. But we knew it would be difficult. I thought we could handle it. Her recent detachment makes me wonder, what if I promised more than I could deliver? What if she regrets getting involved with me in this adventure with studying? After all, instead of a reliable, albeit small, income, I became a student. We live on savings and my modest salary from part-time work. I try hard to remember if there were any signs that she was unhappy. Maybe she was just hiding her disappointment from me, not wanting to distract me from exams. We hardly spend time together, no money, no energy for entertainment. The last time we went to the cinema was about 4 months ago, and even then we left in the middle of the show. The kindergarten said Jamie had a temperature. I sit down on a bench under a spreading maple tree. Autumn leaves rustle under the feet of passers-by. I take out my phone. A photo flashes on the screen, the three of us smiling. I hold the diploma of the electrician's course, which I received before entering the university. Molly was so proud then. I run my finger over her happy face. My chest aches. I promised her a better life, but it seems I only made it worse. Maybe that's why she's silent, afraid to hurt me with her disappointment, or something else. I shudder from the loud clap of thunder. I didn't even notice how the clouds thickened again. Students run to the buildings, covering themselves with folders and hoods. I get up and also hurry to the parking lot. It's time to go home. And in my head, I hear, "I believe you," her words when I promised her happiness in this city. Did she believe me to the end? And do I believe that I can fix everything? There were no answers to these questions under the cold autumn rain. Late in the evening, the apartment was plunged into semi-darkness. After dinner, I read Jamie a book about pirates, put him to bed. Molly said she was tired and went to bed early. I spent the rest of the night fiddling with my notes in the kitchen, trying to catch up on my history reading. It was raining outside. The air in the apartment was damp and cool. The old windows did not retain heat well. Around midnight, I went to take a shower, hoping to wash away the fatigue and worries, but the hot water did not help. Coming out of the bathroom, I tiptoed into the bedroom so as not to wake my wife. In the darkness, I made out her silhouette on the bed, apparently asleep, turned to the wall. I lay down quietly next to her, trying not to creak the old mattress. I lay there for a minute, listening to her breathing. It was shallow, intermittent, as if she were not really sleeping. I wanted to gently touch her shoulder, ask in a whisper if everything was okay, but I did not dare. Our former lightness had gone somewhere, and I didn't know how to get it back. About 10 minutes later, I heard Molly sigh softly and carefully throw back the covers. She sat up and very slowly got out of bed, trying not to disturb me. I immediately closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep. Through slightly parted eyelashes, I saw her silhouette slip out the door. Her footsteps softly rustled along the hallway. The door to the bedroom remained slightly ajar, and I noticed a faint strip of light. Apparently, she went into the kitchen and turned on the nightlight. My heart began to beat faster. Why had she gotten up so early? Insomnia? Or did she want some tea? Over the past month, she had indeed had trouble sleeping. She would get up several times during the night, wander around the kitchen. At the time, I didn't attach any importance to it. You never know, I thought, nerves, worries. But now a vague anxiety arose in me. I carefully sat up in bed, listening. A barely audible sound was coming from the kitchen, a whisper. Molly's voice, very quiet, as if she was afraid of being heard. At first I thought she was talking to someone, but who at such an hour? My heart jumped to my throat. Perhaps she was simply unwell and was talking to herself, or was she praying? But soon I made out fragments of phrases. It was definitely a conversation on the phone. She spoke in a muffled voice, so that I caught only individual words. I stood up slowly and crept up to the bedroom door, trying not to make a sound. I pressed myself against the crack. From there, I could hear her voice a little better. I miss you too, a fragment reached me. Molly was silent for a couple of seconds, apparently listening to the interlocutor's answer. Yes, I love you too, she said quietly again. Everything inside me went cold. I strained my ears to the limit. I couldn't hear whose voice was coming from the speaker. She must have put on headphones or turned down the volume. But her words, I miss you too, you too. Could she say that to one of her friends? No, this clearly didn't sound like a normal conversation. Her intonation soft, gentle, slightly guilty. I haven't heard them like that for a long time. I began to feel feverish. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I froze at the doorway, unable to move. A whisper came from the kitchen again. Mark, please. No, not yet. Soon. The voice trembled, like that of a man begging for something. My ears were ringing. The name she said was like a bell. Mark. My mind immediately raced. Who is Mark? I don't know any Marks around her. Definitely a man's name. She said it so. Tenderly. I almost threw up from the lump that rose in my throat. I jumped back from the door, afraid to hear something else, or, on the contrary, to be caught eavesdropping. Returning to the bed, I slowly sank onto the mattress. My heart was pounding like crazy. It was simply impossible. I don't want to draw conclusions, but are there any other explanations for what I heard? My wife whispers on the phone with Mark in the middle of the night, saying that she misses me. I cover my face with my hands. Maybe I'm going crazy. Maybe this is a dream. Footsteps in the hallway. I lie back down quickly, turning away and closing my eyes. A few seconds later, I feel the mattress on her side dip gently under her weight. Molly is back. I can hear her breathing quicken as if she is worried or upset. She lies down carefully, not touching me. A minute, then another. Through half-closed eyelids, I notice a slight movement. She is wiping something from her cheeks. Tears. Everything inside me turns over. I want to turn around, grab her by the shoulders, ask, "Who is Mark? Why are you crying?" But I don't move. I woke up exhausted in the morning. I think I barely slept a wink before dawn. Molly acted as if nothing had happened. She kissed Jamie as she got him ready for kindergarten, even asked in a calm voice, "Are you late today?" I couldn't answer her calmly. I mumbled something unintelligible about having a lot of work. I avoided meeting her gaze, afraid that everything was written on my face. My head was buzzing. A conversation at night, the name Mark echoing in my temples. Part of me looked for rational explanations. What if this was a relative or an old friend who was ill, and she was comforting him? But deep down I knew I was deceiving myself. The intonations in her voice were too clear. After dropping Jamie off, I didn't go to the university, but to the nearest gas station. I stopped and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking as I opened the messenger. I wanted to scroll through her messages. We had exchanged passwords for our phones a long time ago. We had no secrets before. But then a sharp thought pierced me. What if she deleted everything? Or communicate through some app I don't know about? And most importantly, if I go into her phone without asking, I will cross the line of trust. Although what trust? I slammed my palm on the steering wheel. No, this is not enough. I need proof to face the truth. Instead of going to lectures, I drove back home. My heart was pounding somewhere in my throat as I circled the block, looking for our house. As I approached, I immediately noticed a strange car parked at our entrance. A black sedan, completely unfamiliar. I slowed down to the side, trying not to stand out. My chest went cold. Could it really be him, my lover? A thought flashed through my head. If I'm wrong, I'll disgrace myself. But my legs were already carrying me along the bushes to the windows of our apartment. Our windows overlook the courtyard. Sometimes the tenants don't even lock them. In the summer, they sleep with them wide open. It's hot, after all, and there's no air conditioning. It's October now, but it's still warm during the day, and I noticed that one window was slightly open, a small transom. Coming closer, I heard voices. Molly was laughing quietly. Her laughter was different from what I'd heard in recent weeks, lively, ringing, happy. A man's voice answered something. I couldn't make out the words, but it was clearly him, Mark. There was no doubt. I froze under the window, hiding behind a lilac bush. My heart was pounding so hard that I thought they would hear me inside. Quiet, neighbors. Molly's muffled voice came through the crack. She whispered something and giggled again. I felt the blood rush to my face. They were there, in our living room, whispering happily, afraid to disturb the neighbors through the thin walls. How ironic. Usually it was she and I who were indignant at the noisy neighbor upstairs, and now she herself was afraid to make noise. With her lover in the absence of her husband. I peered slowly over the edge of the windowsill. The curtain was not drawn tightly. There was a narrow strip between the edge of the curtain and the frame. Part of the living room was visible. On the sofa, I saw a man's arm around Molly's waist. My stomach clenched painfully. They were sitting close together. I saw Mark from behind dark hair, broad shoulders. Molly turned to face him, and I caught a glimpse of her expression so tender, which I had not seen for a long time when she looked at me. She was flushed, smiling. In love. Crazy questions raced through my head. How is he better than me? My mind knew that there was no answer now, but my heart was breaking with jealousy and pain. Mark leaned down and kissed her. Molly closed her eyes and returned the kiss, her fingers sliding down his neck. It seemed as if the ground had opened up under my feet. I don't remember how I straightened up and stepped away from the window. My head was filled with noise. My body seemed to have turned to stone, and everything inside was seething. Jealousy, anger, pain, everything was mixed up. I closed my eyes, hoping that the vision would disappear, that it would turn out to be a mistake. But as soon as I pressed my face to the crack again, reality hit me harder. They were no longer on the couch, they were standing in the middle of the room, hugging each other. I couldn't bear to look any further. Everything swam before my eyes. I felt sick. I crawled back, trying not to make any noise, and leaned my back against the cool brick wall of the house, gulping in air. For a while, I just sat under our windows in the drizzle of my own grief. Cold drops touched my head. It seemed like a light rain was starting again, or maybe the leaves were dropping moisture on my hair. I couldn't tell. My temples were pounding. It's true. It's all true. My stomach was burning with nausea, but I held back, just coughing dryly. I doubt they heard the walls may be thin, but not that thin. My fingers dug into the wet grass. I tried to control myself. My first impulse was to rush in, grab this Mark by the scruff of the neck, and throw him out. Images of revenge flashed through my mind, smashing his face in, screaming at Molly, everything going to hell. But I didn't move. What kept me from rage was something stronger or weaker. Fear. Fear of losing control, of causing trouble. Fear of seeing disgust in her eyes, or worse, pity. And then there was the image of our son. If I started a scene now, a fight, where would it end? With the police, the neighbors? Will Jamie get hurt? I clenched my fists until they hurt. I had to make a decision. I realized that I couldn't face them now. I simply couldn't bear to see this picture in person. It would be better if they thought the deception was continuing, but I wasn't mentally prepared. Rising on unsteady legs, I wandered out of the yard. My steps carried me away anywhere, as long as I was far away from that glass window behind which my family was breaking up. Tears burned my eyes, and I gave them free rein. Fortunately, there was no one on the street at that hour. I walked quickly, almost ran, until I found myself on the next street, out of sight of our windows. There, under the shaky canopy of a bus stop, I finally allowed myself to slide down onto a bench and cover my face with my hands. The thin, cheap windows of the apartment let in what I didn't want to know. Now the truth was lashing my cheeks like cold rain, and there was no way to hide from it. I got home at almost the usual time and brought Jamie home from kindergarten. The whole evening passed in a fog. Molly behaved as always, kissed her son, asked him about the pictures he had drawn. I answered monosyllabically, afraid to even look at her again. It seemed that if I caught her eye, I would explode or burst into tears. My mind screamed at me that I must not make a scene in front of the child. I barely restrained myself from immediately taking Jamie out of the apartment somewhere far away. But where? And besides, he must not understand anything. So I just sat next to him, helping my son put together a puzzle on the carpet, and inside I was dying of pain and anger. As soon as I closed my eyes, the image arose before me again. Someone else's arms embracing my wife, her lips on someone else's lips. The thought almost made me want to throw up right in front of Jamie, and I quickly made an excuse that I was going to take a shower. Under the streams of hot water, I let my tears flow quietly, soundlessly, so that no one would hear. A hurricane raged in my chest, but not a sound escaped. I watched the water flow down my hands, and at some point I noticed scratches and abrasions on my fingers, traces from the morning climbing through bushes and grabbing at bricks. As if proof that everything was not a nightmare, I banged my forehead against the cold tiled wall of the shower, trying to pull myself together. I had to decide something. It was unbearable to pretend any longer. Having finally put Jamie to bed, I kissed my son's warm forehead and lingered a few extra seconds by the crib. He was snoring peacefully, hugging his teddy bear. I ran my hand through his blonde hair and quietly left, closing the door. The floor lamp was on in the living room. Molly was sitting on the sofa with a book. She looked up when I appeared. "You're a bit quiet today. Is everything okay?" she asked. There was a slight wariness in her voice. Apparently, she noticed my aloofness during dinner. I stood in the middle of the room, not knowing what to do with my hands. Rage was boiling in my chest, but I forced myself to speak quietly so that, God forbid, my son wouldn't wake up. "We need to talk." Molly froze, closed the book, and put it aside. "About what?" she said casually, but her voice rang out of tune, her eyes darting around. She was nervous. "I think you know what," I breathed out. I felt my fingertips grow cold as adrenaline rushed into my blood. "Who's Mark?" I hadn't meant to start it that way, but the question just came out, straight out, without beating around the bush. The name was like a lash across the silence. Molly went pale, her eyes wide. "What? Which Mark?" She tried to look confused, but her voice broke on the last word. "Don't," I raised my hand, urging her to shut up. My jaw clenched so hard that my teeth ached. "I know everything, Molly. Or rather, I can guess. And today My voice wavered, and I paused to deal with the lump in my throat. "I saw you with him today." Her eyes instantly filled with tears. She pressed her palms to her mouth. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. "I'm sorry," she whispered finally, removing her hands from her face. "Alex, I didn't mean to." She sobbed, unable to continue. Anger flared up inside me, her tears only inflamed me more. "You didn't want to," I hissed, barely holding back a scream. "What didn't you want, Molly? You didn't want me to find out? Or you didn't want to hurt me? Or maybe you didn't want all this, but it just happened." The words flowed like a bitter river. "You let a strange man into our house, into our bed, under my nose, while I sucked in a breath, feeling like I was about to scream." Molly shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It was a mistake," she squeezed out, but I didn't calm down. "What exactly was the mistake? The fact that I found out, or the fact that you slept with him? How long has this been going on? A month? A year? Since when, Molly?" She covered her face with her hands, shaking with sobs, but I had neither pity nor patience. "Did you realize what you were doing?" I continued, coming closer. There was a framed wedding photo of us on the nightstand next to the sofa. I grabbed it. In the picture, Molly and I were young and happy, hugging in front of the registry office. I shook the frame in front of her eyes. "What was that then, huh? Just a pretty picture. Why did you say you loved me later?" I didn't finish. My gaze fell on the wedding ring glittering on her ring finger. I remembered putting it on her finger, promising to be there for her always. My throat tightened. I threw the photograph to the floor. The frame hit the parquet floor with a dull thud, and the glass shattered. The glass shards spattered across the floor at our feet. Molly winced at the sound, uncovered her face, and stared at the shattered glass. The wave of despair receded, leaving behind an icy void. We were silent for several long seconds, staring at the glass that had cracked beneath our feet. Finally, she spoke, very quietly. I didn't want to lose you. I don't know how it all went so far. It went so far that you told him you missed him right next door to me. I spat. How long ago? Tell me honestly. Molly took a shuddering breath. A few months, she whispered. I closed my eyes, trying to comprehend, while I, unsuspectingly, pored over my textbooks or played with our son in the next room. She was secretly texting, meeting. The room seemed to sway before my eyes. I took a step back, leaning my hand against the wall. Molly got up from the couch and stepped towards me. Alex, I'm sorry. It was a mistake. I'll break it off with him, honestly. Let's try to start over. Her voice trembled. I raised my hand, stopping her impulse. A bitter wave rose inside me. At first, I asked hoarsely, what? Like at first, Molly? Like nothing happened? Pretend to be a happy family, the three of us hanging out on weekends, and you're thinking about him? Or do you really think I'll be able to live like before after this? She shook her head, tears falling onto the floor. No, not like before, but for Jamie. She said through her tears, I was confused, I was lonely, you were never there. And Mark, he just listened at first, understood. And then everything started spinning, I didn't have time to stop. I'm sorry. She took another step towards me, but I pulled away. Don't you dare make excuses, I whispered. I understand. I worked a lot, studied. I really wasn't home much. But does that justify you ruining everything we had? My voice broke. I fell silent, swallowing a lump. She lowered her eyes. The sound of rain could be heard outside the window. The drops were rhythmically tapping on the windowsill. In this silence, I suddenly realized that instead of anger, there was emptiness inside. Our life, our home like glass, everything is fragile, broken into pieces, and no one has the strength to collect them. Molly carefully bent down and picked up the framed photograph from the floor. She ran her finger along the cracked glass. I am guilty, she said quietly. I cannot be forgiven. I was speechless. I watched her carefully pull our photo out of the broken frame so as not to cut herself, and something in me finally broke. I unclenched my fists. I hadn't even noticed how I'd been clenching them all this time and whispered, what should we do now? She pressed the photograph to her chest, not looking at me. As you say, she answered barely audibly. I ran my hand over my face. Should I tell her it was over? That I wanted her to go to her Mark? The words stuck in my throat. Oddly enough, now that the truth was out in the open, it didn't make me feel any better. Just empty and scared. Sleep was all I could manage to squeeze out. We both need sleep. She nodded. I turned and walked away, past her, trying not to touch her. For a second, I wanted to hug her, as one might comfort a loved one in grief, but the thought of Mark immediately burned. I went into the bedroom, picked up a pillow, and walked out, leaving her standing among the shards of glass and the debris of our lives. That night, I slept on the sofa in the living room, although I was wide awake. Shadows from random passing cars trembled along the walls. Rain pounded the glass. My head echoed loudly. Everything collapsed, shattered like that frame. And not a sound anymore, no sobbing, no reproaches. Only silence. The morning after the betrayal was revealed began surprisingly routinely. I woke up on the couch with Jamie poking me in the cheek with his finger. Dad, wake up. For a moment, opening my eyes and seeing my son's smile, I thought that the whole thing was a bad dream. But as soon as I heard Molly's cautious footsteps down the hall, reality hit me with all its weight. She peered out of the bedroom uncertainly. Our eyes met for a second, and then we both looked away. An oppressive silence hung in the house. Molly spoke first, turning to her son. Good morning, Bunny, her voice hoarse from tears. I stood up and silently walked into the kitchen to make Jamie's breakfast. Molly tried to help, but I muttered that I could handle it myself. She quietly went to wash up. All this time, two forces were fighting inside me. One wanted to scream, to spill out the pain, maybe even forgive for the sake of my son's peace. The other could neither look at her nor hear her voice without a flash of anger. In the end, I chose the third path, cold indifference. Jamie, feeling the tension, turned his head from me to his mother. but in his childish naivety, he asked nothing. I forced a smile as I sat him down at the table, oatmeal with apples, his favorite. Molly came out of the bathroom and started to approach the table, but I said sharply, "I'll take him myself." She nodded and stepped back, clutching her crossed arms to her chest as if trying to keep warm. In the car on the way to kindergarten, Jamie suddenly asked, "Dad, why was Mom crying?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Apparently, he had noticed her red eyes in the morning. Choosing his words, he answered, "Mommy is a little unwell. Her throat hurts. That's why she cried." "It hurts, that's why she cries. But she'll get better soon." Jamie nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Shall we buy a lollipop for Mom, like she does for me when my throat hurts?" he asked. My heart sank. "Of course," I answered quietly. When I got home from kindergarten, I found Molly gone, her bag gone, a note on the table. "Drive postcards to client. Be back for lunch." I crumpled the paper, a lump in my throat. She had fled the conversation, and I even felt better. At least I didn't have to make eye contact again. I hadn't gone to class today, having emailed my professors about my family situation. I didn't have the strength to sit in an empty apartment either. I went outside and wandered aimlessly through the neighborhood in the drizzling rain. My head was splitting from lack of sleep and constant thoughts. Like an obsessive motif, our nightly exchanges sounded in my memory over and over. Here I was screaming at her, "How long has this been going on?" Here was the sound of breaking glass. Here was her voice, "For Jamie's sake." Each time I remembered it, I felt a surge of rage, then a wave of grief. Without noticing the road, I found myself on the Willamette River embankment. The gray flow of the water reflected the equally gray sky. The usually busy park was almost deserted due to the dampness. I leaned on the railing and closed my eyes, letting the cool wind blow across my tear-stained face. I needed a break, some kind of medicine for this heartache. Chaos reigned inside. Part of me wanted it all to be a mistake, and I could go back to my old life. Another part hated Molly at that moment, imagined her with him. I exhaled loudly. Life has taught me so many things: how to cope with storms, save people, work until exhaustion. But no one taught me what to do when the person you love betrays you. I took out my phone and automatically scrolled through my contacts. The names of old buddies from the Navy flashed by, a couple of colleagues from the warehouse. My hand automatically stopped at the name of my best friend from my service days, Mike. We hadn't spoken for over a year. After his discharge, he went to Florida. I wasn't sure if it was a good time to call and what I would tell him. Nevertheless, I pressed the call. Beeps, once, twice. No one answered. Maybe the number had changed, or he was busy. I hung up without leaving a message. This idea of conversation seemed stupid to me. What could Mike do 1,000 miles away? He'd regret it, shake his head. It wouldn't help me now. Late in the evening, the phone suddenly rang. Mike's name appeared on the screen. He apologized for not being able to answer right away. We talked for about 10 minutes. I briefly told him what had happened. Mike first cursed out of anger for me, then began to cheer me up. He reminded me of how many difficult situations we had experienced in the service and said that I was the most resilient guy he knew. He asked how I could help, if I should fly over. I declined, thanking him his presence could change little now, and my friend felt in my voice that I was still holding on. We agreed to call again in a few days. After hanging up, I felt a warm wave of gratitude. We may be far away, but I am not alone. They remember me and worry about me. I wander along the embankment, soaking wet. Finally, when my legs are already buzzing from fatigue, I return home. Molly is sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea. Seeing me, she gets up nervously. "Where have you been?" I was worried. She began quietly. "I'm wet. Water is dripping from my hood right onto the floor." "I was walking," I said, taking off my shoes. "You have nothing to worry about." She tensed up at my words. "We need to talk," she said, looking at the cup in her hands. I silently went into the bedroom to change into dry clothes. A couple of minutes later, I came out. She was still standing there, shifting from one foot to the other. "Speak," I said through gritted teeth. Molly took a deep breath. I want you to know. I told him everything this morning. That I don't want to continue. That it's over. Her voice trembled. I broke up with him. Forever. I chuckled involuntarily, although there was nothing funny about it. So what? Rejoice? Thank you for deciding now? There was a caustic bitterness in my voice. Molly shook her head. No, not for gratitude. Just so you know, I'm very guilty. If there's even a small chance to fix everything, I want to try. For us, for our son. She looked at me with eyes full of tears, and it was as if ice had formed inside me. Fix it, I repeated quietly. I don't know, Molly. Right now, I can't even think about it. It hurts. Every time I look at you. I stopped, shaking my head. I don't know. She nodded, brushing away a tear. I understand. I'll wait as long as it takes. Maybe, maybe we should go to someone together. Well, to a family psychologist. A lot of people go through this now, she suggested uncertainly. I rubbed the bridge of my nose with my fingers. My head was aching from fatigue and tension. I'm not sure, he answered evasively. It's hard for me to even talk about it right now. I'm sorry, but I'm not ready to decide. Let's leave it as is for now, for Jamie's sake. We'll see. The words came with difficulty. Part of me wanted to say a categorical, no, no psychologist, we're done. But I wasn't sure what I wanted. She nodded slowly. Okay, I understand. I will wait and do everything so that you can trust me again, she whispered. I had nothing to say. The evening passed tensely. We hardly spoke. I helped Jamie with the applique for the kindergarten. Molly went to the bedroom, saying she had a headache. Before going to bed, I went to her to get a blanket. I settled down for the night in the living room again. She lay in the darkness, turned away, sobbing quietly. I stood in the doorway, feeling a pang of pity, but found no words of comfort for her. I just silently left, closing the door. In the following days, we lived like neighbors. We talked only about the necessary, who would pick up our son, what bills to pay. Both of our souls were wounded, and no easy measure could heal them quickly. I threw myself into my studies, trying to distract myself. In the evenings, when there was no shift at the warehouse, I went for long runs around the neighborhood almost to exhaustion, just to avoid thinking. The pain subsided, then covered me again as soon as I saw her or heard the melody on her phone, and now I was looking for a catch in everything she did. One night, I caught myself sitting in the kitchen at night, scrolling through her social media pages, although I knew that I would not find an answer there as to why she did this. I simply tormented myself, looking at our old happy photos. One of those evenings I realized that I couldn't go on like this. I needed a break, a real one, not just a semblance. After all, I'm not made of iron. Trying to push the pain deep down, I was only delaying the inevitable decisions. I had to either forgive or break up. There was no third option. But how can I know which path is right? It's hard to cope alone. And then fate, apparently, decided to push me, sending help from where I didn't expect it. About a week passed. I noticed that the pain of betrayal was gradually dulling, replaced by deep fatigue. Our strange regime of coexistence with Molly continued. We behaved correctly, but coldly. She tried to please me in small ways. She left dinner, primped herself when I came. But all this was unpleasant to me and only reminded me of her guilt. In those days, I looked for any excuse to stay away from home longer. If I had no shift at work, I would sit at the university until late, taking advantage of the fact that the library was open until night. One such evening, after finishing my physics lab assignment, I went into a small cafe near campus. Students usually gather there to drink coffee and work on their laptops. I ordered a large cappuccino to go, but seeing a free table by the window, I decided to sit down and catch my breath. The autumn twilight was thickening outside, a drizzle was falling. The few passers-by were hurrying to their destinations under umbrellas. I took out my phone, scrolling through the news feed, trying not to think about anything. Alex, I suddenly heard an uncertain female voice. I looked up from the phone. Next to my table stood a young woman with reddish-brown shoulder-length hair and a green raincoat. She looked at me with mild surprise and a smile. It took me a couple of seconds to recognize facial features that I hadn't seen for a good 10 years. "Clara?" I leaned forward, not believing my eyes. She beamed. "You recognized me." "Hello." Clara took off her hood. Her hair curled slightly from the rain. I jumped up, unexpectedly hugging her. She laughed with joy and returned the hug. "What a meeting," I said, letting her go and looking her over. "How many years, Clara? You haven't changed at all." She smiled and shook her head. "Flatterer. 10 years is a long time. You've matured, it's obvious." I invited her to sit down, my insides shaking with surprise. "Clara, an old friend of mine with whom I went to school together. We were friends in high school. After graduation, I went to the Navy, and our paths diverged. There were rare correspondences, but then even that died out. I knew that she studied somewhere on the East Coast, and then I completely lost sight of her. And here she is sitting opposite me, a warm smile, the same freckles on her cheeks as in her youth." "How did you find me?" I asked, still stunned. She still didn't take her eyes off me, and it seemed she didn't believe in the coincidence either. "No way. Pure coincidence. I dropped in for a coffee after work. I looked, the face was familiar. I wondered if I was mistaken. But no, it was definitely you. Small world, huh?" I shook my head, smiling. "It couldn't be closer. So many years and suddenly meeting in your hometown. You're not from Portland. Do you live here?" "For a year now," nodded Clara. "I was transferred here for work. Now I work in a marketing agency. The office is not far from here." "I see," I said, feeling a sudden wave of joy from having my old friend nearby. "I didn't know. What are you doing? In Portland on business, or?" "You're settled somewhere in the east of the state, aren't you?" she asked. She must have remembered that I was returning from the Navy to my parents. "Yes, that's right. We lived in Hermiston, but we moved here 2 years ago. I I study at PSU. Can you imagine?" I admit I was a little embarrassed. Clara raised her eyebrows in surprise and laughed joyfully. "Really, Alex, that's great. I remember you always said that you missed a proper education." She covered my hand with hers on the table. "I'm so happy for you." The warmth of her words stung me. I suddenly felt ashamed. Here Clara is sincerely happy about my achievements, but at home. I pushed away the heavy thoughts and smiled. "Thank you. Yes, I decided to make up for it in my old age," I joked. "Second year, righteous laborers." She nodded, looking at me. "You don't look old. You look great, although—" She paused, and concern sounded in her voice. "Although a little tired, is everything okay?" The direct question confused me. I had recently gotten out of the habit of sympathy, especially from those who were not aware of the situation. Clara had always been able to read me like an open book, even in school. I looked away to my cooling coffee. How to answer? I couldn't tell her about my troubles right away. "Well, I have a lot to worry about," I said evasively. "Study, work, my son." "A son?" Clara's eyes lit up. "Do you have a son?" I nodded, feeling awkward for some reason. "Yes, Jamie, 4 years old. Really cool guy. In kindergarten now." "I can imagine," she smiled. "So you're married, have a family," she said, and sadness flashed in her eyes. My stomach sank. I could have remained silent or nodded politely, but the words came out of their own accord. "Married. Well, for now, yes. But everything is complicated," I said dully. She looked at me carefully, her head tilted slightly to the side, like an old friend ready to listen. "Sorry, I don't want to pry into something that's none of my business. But if difficult means that not everything is smooth, I'm very sorry." A lump rose in my throat. The sympathetic tone of her voice almost made my nerves tremble. The wounds were too fresh. I took a sip of coffee, gathering my courage. In front of me sat a person who had once been close, and now, strangely enough, I wanted to speak out. I realized how much I missed real communication. Since the betrayal, I had not told anyone about my feelings. I had kept everything inside. And here next to me was Clara, the very one to whom I had once trusted the secrets of my youth. We talked for an hour or more, I think. I don't remember how I started. I think I asked her about her life. She answered, telling me that she was not married. There had been an engagement, but it hadn't worked out. Work, moving. Then she gently asked what had happened to me, and I, after a little hesitation, decided, come what may. First, I mentioned that my wife and I were having problems. Then, seeing her attentive, warm gaze, I admitted that it was serious. The words flowed by themselves. Without going into unnecessary details, I said that Molly had cheated on me. These words did not come easy. I had never said them out loud before. Clara sympathetically squeezed my hand and whispered, "What a nightmare." There were tears in her eyes, as if the pain had happened to her herself. I continued, no longer looking at her, as if I was afraid to see pity. I explained that now we were in limbo. I did not know what to do next. That I was trying to act normal for my son's sake, but inside I was broken. I spoke incoherently, jumping from one thought to another, but Clara seemed to understand everything. She didn't interrupt, only quietly asking something like, "How long ago?" or "You found out recently, right?" I nodded and continued to express my pain. When my rambling monologue dried up, I felt relieved and immediately ashamed for dumping so much negativity on her. But Clara didn't seem to think so. She looked at me attentively, and there was so much concern and warmth in her gaze that I involuntarily relaxed. "Sorry I said too much to you," I muttered, lowering my head. "We haven't seen each other for so many years, and I immediately, about something like that." Clara shook her head. "Don't apologize. I'm so glad you told me. If it makes you feel even a little better, then it was worth it for me to come to this cafe today." She smiled softly. "Alex, you can always count on me, do you hear?" My eyes suddenly stung. I felt like a teenager again, to whom a loved one says such simple, necessary words. I turned to the window, trying to swallow the lump without noticing. "Thank you, Clara," I said quietly. "Your arrival is like some kind of salvation." She blushed slightly and shook my hand, which she had not let go of during the conversation. "We're friends," she said. "I knew that fate would bring us together again, really. I often thought of you, thought about you. It's a shame you're going through a tough time right now. But you're not alone, right? If you need to talk or help, I'm here." I nodded. A long, forgotten feeling was spreading inside me that I was understood. I immediately wanted to know more about her, how she lived these years, whether she was happy. One word led to another. We talked for about an hour, changing the topic to lighter memories of school, mutual acquaintances. I even laughed sincerely a couple of times, listening to her witty comments. It was like a breath of fresh air after a long dive underwater. Realizing the time, I realized it was time to go get my son. We exchanged phone numbers and agreed to meet again soon. As we parted, Clara hugged me tightly and said, "Hang in there, sailor." I smiled at this school nickname before. She always made fun of my desire to join the Navy. Now, her words sounded like support. I rode behind Jamie with a surprisingly light feeling. For the first time in a long time, instead of a lump of pain inside, there was almost peace. The familiar road warmed me with a thought. Someone dear to me had returned to my life, and the silence no longer seemed so echoing. On Monday, I got home a little earlier than usual. A lecture had been canceled, and I decided to stop by to change before picking up Jamie. When I walked into the apartment, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The hallway was unusually empty. Her coat was missing from the coat rack, her everyday bag from the shelf. My heart sank. I walked into the kitchen. There was a folded piece of paper on the table. I recognized Molly's handwriting. My hands froze in midair for a moment before I decided to take the note. "Alex," the lines read, "you know how much it pains me to write this, but I don't think I can do it any other way. I see how much you suffer with me. I see how hard it is for you to be under the same roof, and I understand that it is only my fault. I cannot forgive myself. I accept it. I have decided to leave for a while. I need to think, and I think you do too. I will be staying with my sister in Seattle. She has agreed to shelter me for as long as it takes. I cannot take Jamie away from you. He has to go to kindergarten. He has friends there, and you can cope as well as I can. I will go alone. Please do not be angry. It will be better this way, at least for now. I will contact you when you are ready to discuss our next steps. Thank you for everything. Take care of our boy. I am sorry, Molly. I sank into a chair, clutching the piece of paper as if it were a life preserver. The room swam before my eyes. She had gone, alone. Conflicting feelings fought in my chest. Relief after all, I no longer had to endure this oppressive neighborhood, trying to pretend in front of my son, and at the same time panic. Was this the end? Or a pause? The words of the note sounded final, although she had written for a while. I felt that this time could become forever. Looking around, I noticed details that hadn't caught my eye before. Several empty shelves on the rack she'd taken her documents, and, apparently, her favorite books. Her makeup bag was missing from the corner of the dresser. Her favorite shoes were missing from the hallway. She really had thought of everything and done it while I was out. So she'd decided in advance she must have packed her things over the weekend. Why hadn't I noticed? Probably because we barely talked, and on Sunday evening, I came home very late. I was working part-time delivering pizza. I took a temporary gig to spend less time at home. She chose the moment when I was out so she wouldn't have to explain herself in person. Apparently, she thought I'd lose my temper or not let her go. Or maybe she just didn't have the courage to look me in the eye. I sat in the kitchen for a long time, reading the note over and over. The pain was still there, but now there was a strange emptiness mixed in with it. That was it. The end. No psychologist, no, let's wait and see. She had decided for both of us that it was better this way. Was it really better? I didn't know. One thing was clear, we were apart now. For how long no one knew, but my gut instinct told me it was unlikely she would return. I glanced at my watch and jumped up. It was almost time to go pick up my son. I carefully folded the note and put it in my pocket. I barely remember the way to the kindergarten. My thoughts were all jumbled up. What should I do now? What should I tell my child? On the way I dialed Molly's number. No answer, just an answering machine. She had probably already left or turned off her phone. I wrote her a message. I read the note. Let me know when you get there. We'll talk when we have a chance. As I picked up Jamie, I thought about what to say to him that evening. He ran up to me happily, holding a drawing of the three of us smiling, me, his mom, and him holding hands. My heart ached at the sight, but I complimented the drawing and smiled. In the car, my son chattered away, and I struggled to answer, feeling a migraine coming on. This was going to be a tough conversation, perhaps the toughest of my life. At home, I heated up dinner and cooked pasta. Jamie asked where his mother was. I had thought of an answer in advance. I said that my mother had gone to see Aunt Lisa, Molly's sister, for a while because she was sick and she needed help. My son was upset, of course. He even cried. He was used to his mother tucking him in every night. I had to stay cheerful, assuring him that his mother loved him and would just be back soon when she got better. Inside, each of his questions cut like a knife. When exactly will she be back? Will she call me? Can I draw her a picture and send it? I answered as best I could, but my soul was breaking. After putting my son to bed, I sat down on the kitchen couch, where the faint scent of her favorite perfume still lingered. I pulled out the crumpled note and ran my eyes over it again. I couldn't believe that after 7 years of marriage, everything was falling apart completely through a letter on the table. Memories floated through my mind, Molly laughing as I carried her over the threshold on our wedding day. There she was, holding newborn Jamie, tired but happy. And there was the last photo of the three of us on a picnic last summer, all smiling. Was it all a lie? No, people just change, feelings fade, or are killed by pain. I found myself regretting and glad in a way, glad that I no longer had to fight every day not to show anger or pain in front of her. That the decision had essentially been made, even if the words divorce weren't used. That's probably where we're headed. Maybe she's already found a lawyer, or will soon. Or maybe she's hoping that time apart will fix everything. But as I read the lines of her letter, I felt that Molly didn't believe in our future. And perhaps I didn't either. I spent the rest of the evening sorting through our things, not out of revenge or anger, but to keep my hands and head occupied. I packed up the photo frames with our photos together and put them away in the closet. While putting the photos away, I came across that very photo with the cracked glass. I shook off the shards. The photo was almost undamaged, just a scratch across our smiling faces. Gritting my teeth, I shoved it into the box, covering it with an old tablecloth so it wouldn't be an eyesore. Before going to bed, I checked my phone. There was a short message from Molly. She had arrived. No details, just a request to kiss Jamie and a promise to call in a couple of days. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to write. My soul was heavy, but in the silence of the night I heard some relief. I had to go on living for my son's sake, for sure, and I didn't want to fall into this void of loneliness. My memory came back to me. "You are not alone," Clara's voice from the cafe. I remembered our conversation almost word for word. It must be time to tell her what had happened. On Wednesday afternoon, after picking up Jamie and returning home, I found a key in the mailbox. A note from the landlady said a repairman would be coming over the weekend to change the front lock. It had been acting up for a while, and I had complained. The new key was in an envelope. I turned it over in my fingers, feeling a strange symbolism. Here was the beginning of a renewal of the house, even on a physical level. But for now, it was just a new lock, not a new life. The real changes were yet to come. At home, I decided to cook dinner myself. I had to learn to cope. A recipe for spicy chili con carne came to mind, which I had once seen from a colleague. In the refrigerator, there was minced meat, beans, tomatoes, quite enough. I started cooking while keeping an eye on my son, who was drawing at the kitchen table. Thoughts were spinning in my head. Is this what our evenings will look like now? Just me and him. Molly usually puts the laundry on at this time, preparing his clothes for tomorrow. For the first time, the whole household fell on me, and although I was not afraid of work, the realization was a little frightening. While I was cooking, I thought about Clara. After Molly left, I texted her and told her briefly about the note. Clara responded almost immediately, her words sympathetic and at the same time cautiously hopeful, like, maybe it's for the best. She offered to come over to help me, but I flatly refused at first. It was awkward, since our house had only been without a mistress for 2 days. However, by Wednesday we talked again, and I finally invited her to dinner. I needed an adult conversationalist, and she seemed eager to see me. I warned her that I was making my signature chili and joked that it would be very spicy. She said she would bring sour cream and corn chips to soften the heat. When Clara knocked, a pot of chili was simmering on low heat. Jamie was watching cartoons in the living room, so I went out to answer the door. Clara was standing there with 2 large bags. "Hi, I've brought some presents," she smiled. "Come in," I stepped aside, letting her in. She took off her jacket, put the bags on the floor, and unexpectedly hugged me tightly. "How are you?" she asked quietly, looking straight into my eyes. I was momentarily speechless. Her sincere warmth almost brought tears to my eyes. But I managed to control myself and smiled. "I'm holding on. It's a little better now." She nodded and clapped me on the shoulder. "So, where is your boy? I'd love to meet him." "I'll call you now." I looked into my son's room. "Jamie, come on, meet him. Dad's friend has come to visit us." The boy jumped out, first stared at Clara with curiosity, then hid behind my leg. I picked him up. "Son, this is Miss Clara. We went to school together. We've been friends for a long time. She's a good girl. Don't be afraid." Clara waved her hand. "Hi, Jamie. Your dad told me so much about you. I brought you something tasty." With these words, she fished a jar of homemade chocolate chip cookies out of the bag. Her son's eyes widened. "Cookies?" he asked quietly. "Yes, I baked it myself," Clara winked. Jamie jumped out of my arms and came closer. "Can I have one?" he asked, looking from me to our guest. "Of course, baby," Clara replied, opening the jar. 5 minutes later, they were sitting side by side at the table, and I was pouring spicy chili into plates. Clara managed to quickly find an approach to the child. She asked him about the drawings that were hanging on the refrigerator. Jamie was embarrassed, but clearly pleased with the attention of the new aunt. I put the plates in front of them. Be careful, it's spicy. Clara inhaled the aroma and closed her eyes blissfully. It smells so delicious. You're a real master chef, Alex. I chuckled. It's the only thing I can cook properly. A universal bachelor's dish. Boil it, and it's ready for 3 days. Having said this, I stopped myself and met Clara's understanding gaze. She tactfully changed the subject, asking Jamie about the daycare. The three of us were having dinner, and the scene was both strange and cozy. I found myself laughing at the jokes of the baby and Clara as if all the problems had been left outside the kitchen. At one point, Jamie got sour cream on his nose. Clara and I both reached out to wipe it off, our hands crossed, our eyes met. We smiled at the same time and looked away. After dinner, Clara insisted on helping clean up. I protested, but she had already rolled up her sleeves and started washing the plates. I gave in and started wiping them dry. You're a big help, I said quietly as Jamie ran off to play. I honestly don't know how to thank you. Clara looked at him seriously. Just don't disappear again, okay? She added softly. I'm so glad to be here with you. You have no idea how glad I am that we met. I felt the warmth of her words. At that moment, I noticed us in the reflection of the window, the two of us in the kitchen, bags with stored products rustling behind us, a saucepan gleaming on the stove. As if it were the most ordinary family scene. I drove away the obsession. We are not a family. Clara is just a good friend. But somewhere deep in my soul, a thought stirred. Could it be otherwise? I immediately shamed myself for such thoughts. While we were cleaning, I asked Clara to help me fold some of my wife's things. Molly had left a whole pile of clothes in the closet. Apparently, she hadn't taken everything, hoping to return. I wasn't going to throw them out or give them away without her knowledge. I just wanted to take them all off and put them in big bags to keep them out of sight. Clara was happy to help. We moved the clothes from the bedroom to the guest sofa, carefully folding them and putting them in bags. At one point, Clara pulled out an old sweater of Molly's, covered in pills. I remember this sweater, she said suddenly. You wore it to school. Is it yours? I looked closer. Sure enough, it was my old blue sweater, the one I wore before the Navy. I didn't even know it was stored here. Yeah. Well, I grinned. It was so comfortable. Molly later took it under herself and wore it around the house. Clara ironed the fabric and unexpectedly handed me the sweater. Keep it for yourself. Things that bring back good memories should be kept. I picked up the sweater. A faint scent of lavender hit my nose. Molly always put sachets in the closet. But something else popped into my head. The school hallways, me in this sweater, Clara laughing at some joke I made. I muttered, well, let it be. Thank you. We continued folding in silence. It was already about 10 o'clock when we finished. I noticed that Jamie had become quiet when I looked in. I saw that he was fast asleep on the rug among the toys. I carefully carried him to bed, kissed his forehead. Returning to the living room, I found Clara dozing on the sofa, leaning against the back. It had been a long day for all of us. Hey, I called out quietly. Do you want to sleep? She perked up. Ah, it seems a little. It's already late. I guess I have to go. I looked out the window. It was raining heavily outside. The clock hands showed 2 o'clock in the morning. Where are you going in the rain? Stay, I blurted out, surprising myself with my own impulse. We have a second room free. That is, a bedroom, but I don't sleep there, so if anything. I began to explain confusedly. Clara smiled softly, blushing. Thank you, Alex. But I don't think it's worth it. Not yet, she corrected herself, looking down. I'll call a taxi, don't worry. We froze for a moment. The understanding between us was wordless. Nothing was said out loud, but it was clear. It was not the time to rush. I offered her an umbrella and walked her to the car. As we said goodbye, she suddenly kissed me on the cheek. Take care of yourself. I'm happy that you let me into your life again. I squeezed her hand. You can't even imagine how happy I am about this. We exchanged glances, full of everything we hadn't yet dared to say. After the taxi drove away into the rain, I stood for a few minutes under the drizzling sky, feeling the ghostly touch of her lips on my cheek. The house, which had recently been empty, again smelled of freshly cooked dinner, cookies, and laughter. Later that night, I lay awake for a long time. Clara's image stood before my eyes, the way she gently wiped Jamie's nose from sour cream, the way she laughed at my jokes, the way she seriously and carefully folded things. I knew that something important was happening in my heart. Not much time had passed since our chance meeting, but the feeling that was emerging was bright and deep. I was a little afraid to admit it to myself. I was still officially the husband of another woman. The wound of betrayal had not yet completely healed. However, next to Clara, the pain retreated, as if her warmth was healing my cracks. I thought that maybe fate had given me a second chance at love, and it would be stupid to miss it. With these thoughts, I finally fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. We met at the county courthouse on a cloudy February morning. The last 2 months had been surprisingly quiet. Molly stayed with her sister, occasionally calling to talk to her son. She came over for a few weekends to see Jamie. I would take him to her mother or sister. We talked politely, keeping the conversation focused on the child's needs. In late January, she herself began talking about divorce. She said it was the right and honest thing to do. I agreed. By that point, I had little doubt that our marriage was beyond saving. Each of us had our own path ahead of us. It was painful to admit, but that pain had long since become a background sensation. We filed a joint plea, and now our final meeting with the judge was scheduled. While we waited for the call, we sat on a wooden bench in the hallway. There were few people around, and it was deathly quiet, except for the loud ticking of a clock somewhere around the corner. We barely spoke. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat, and my palms were sweating. The air in this hallway seemed heavier than usual, as if time itself were waiting in the silence before the verdict. Molly looked pale and intent, her fingers fiddling with the edge of her scarf. I impulsively handed her the bottle of water I had with me. She nodded gratefully and took a sip. "Is Jamie okay?" she asked quietly, not looking at me. "Yes, everything is fine. I left it at my neighbor's for a couple of hours. He is making a snowman," I answered just as quietly. She smiled weakly. "He loves snow." "Yeah," was all I said. Silence reigned again. As on that last night of our row, we had nothing more to say to each other. All the way to the court, I wondered if there was a single word that could sum up the 7 years we had lived together. I found none. We were invited into a small courtroom. The judge, an elderly man with a tired face, quickly looked over the documents and clarified whether everything had been agreed upon regarding the property and the child. We had previously drawn up an agreement through lawyers. I would keep the car and continue to rent an apartment. She would take our small savings. Regarding Jamie, we decided that he would live with me, and she could visit him whenever she wanted, and perhaps take him with her for the summer. There was no argument I did not want to deprive my son of his mother, and it was probably more convenient for her that he remained in a familiar environment. The judge nodded approvingly, seeing that there were no conflicts. He asked several standard questions, to which we answered in monosyllables. My answers sounded muffled, in a strange voice in the silence of the room, as if it were not me speaking, but a machine. Molly remained calm, spoke quietly but confidently. In the end, the judge announced that our marriage was dissolved. The gavel banged. It sounded mundane, as if the decision was purely administrative. But in my soul, it was as if something had finally broken. I looked down, clasping my hands behind my back, while the lawyer congratulated us on a quick and civilized divorce. We walked out of the courtroom side by side and slowed as we approached the courthouse exit. Molly was the first to break the silence. "Thank you for not dragging it out and being honest," she said quietly. "I guess it's best for both of us." I nodded. "I hope so." He paused and added, "If anything happens, call me about Jamie. You know, I'm never against it." "I know," she lowered her eyes. "You're a good father, I couldn't ask for anything better. Her voice trembled. She quickly looked away. I couldn't find what to say. It was on the tip of my tongue to wish her happiness or ask how she would be now. But I kept silent. Perhaps it wasn't necessary, we both made our choice. On the steps of the courthouse, she stopped and unexpectedly extended her hand to me for a handshake, a formal yet symbolic gesture. "Good luck to you, Alex," she said quietly. I hesitated a little, then shook her small, cold hand. "You too, Molly. Goodbye." She squeezed my hand tighter for a second, as if she wanted to add something, but she didn't. She unclenched her fingers, adjusted her bag on her shoulder, and, without looking back, headed down the steps. I watched her go, feeling a strange emptiness inside. That's how our story ended, simply, without loud words, without scenes. In a quiet courtroom, to the ticking of the clock in the hallway. A sparse swarm of snowflakes swirled in the air. I took a deep breath of the frosty air. Perhaps silence was the only thing appropriate at such moments. No words could express the mixture of sadness about the past and the quiet relief that the suffering was ending. I took out my phone. A new message from Clara had already appeared on the screen. "How are you? I was thinking about you. Is it over? I'm here if you need me." I typed a short reply. "I'm free." And after a second's hesitation, I added, "Thank you." Putting the phone away, I turned up the collar of my coat and stepped forward, towards the cold day and a new chapter in my life. It was a May morning when we moved into our new apartment. After the divorce, I had decided to stay in the old place for a while. The memories hung too heavily on those walls. Fortunately, a better option had been found. A small apartment next to a park, a 10-minute drive from campus. It wasn't that much more expensive, but the building was newer, and there were no neighbors upstairs with a subwoofer. Our windows now looked out onto greenery. The living room overlooked a small park with a playground. It was quiet and cozy around us, just what we needed for a new beginning. The area seemed so quiet and green compared to our previous bustling neighborhood. I packed up my things gradually, tidying up and throwing out unnecessary junk. It turned out that we didn't have that much stuff at all fit in a couple of trips in a rented minivan. Clara volunteered to help with the move, and I didn't argue. In fact, she had become Jamie and me's guardian angel in recent months. It's hard to imagine how I would have managed without her. We spent almost all of our free time together. She came over to play with Jamie when I needed to study for exams. I helped her fix the furniture in her rented apartment. It turned out that my service in the Navy had given me a reputation as a jack of all trades. We hadn't yet called our relationship anything official, but in fact we had become very close. There was only one line that remained uncrossed. Perhaps we were both afraid of rushing and ruining what already seemed like a miracle. On moving day, we spent the morning loading boxes and furniture. Jamie happily ran around the empty rooms, saying goodbye to his old place. He had been told that we were moving to a better house, and he took it as an adventure. Clara drove up in her car, brought us coffee and donuts to refresh ourselves. She looked cheerful and happy, and immediately began giving commands about which boxes to take where. Laughing, I called her moving captain. She gave a playful salute in response, and we continued to carry things. By midday, everything we needed had been moved. The new apartment greeted us with clean, bright walls and the smell of fresh paint. They had done some light cosmetic repairs before we moved in. Right in the middle of the living room, we plopped down on the still unpacked sofa with relief. Jamie immediately settled on my lap, tired but happy. Clara sat down next to me and pushed her hair off her forehead. Phew. Well, happy housewarming, I suppose. Hooray! Jamie shouted, not fully understanding, but joining in the general merriment. I looked around the spacious room filled with boxes and smiled. Thank you, my dear movers. Without you, I would have been hauling for a week. Clara lightly nudged me with her shoulder. Don't be dramatic. The most fun part is yet to come, sorting and putting everything away. I pretended to groan as I looked at the mountain of boxes. Okay, we can do that later, I sighed. Right now, I think we should celebrate. Clara narrowed her eyes slyly. You mean pizza and cola, because champagne is banned in the presence of minors. Exactly, I laughed. A festive dinner for the new settlers. Now we'll order the biggest pizza in town. With pepperoni, Jamie said from his perch on my lap. Of course, my friend, I ruffled my son's hair. We ate the pizza practically on the floor, sitting on a blanket, like at a picnic. Jamie, after such a busy day, passed out on the couch at about 3 o'clock. I carried him to the new nursery and put him to bed, covering him with a soft blanket. When I returned, I found Clara standing by the living room window. She was looking at the park across the street. Spring was in full swing. The trees were covered with young greenery. The sun was playing with glare on the leaves. I quietly came up from behind and put my arm around Clara's shoulders. She didn't flinch. She had gotten used to my touch over the past months. She turned her face to me. "Are you happy?" she asked, almost in a whisper. I thought for a second and nodded. Yes, calm and happy. He looked into her eyes and added, "Much of the credit for this is yours." Clara blushed and pressed herself against me. We stood there, embracing, looking out at the sunlit park. I remembered that foggy dawn when I stood at the embankment railing all alone and thought there was no way out. How everything has changed since then. I slowly took the keychain with the new keys to the apartment out of my pocket. I separated one and turned it over in my fingers. "What do you have there?" Clara asked, looking up at me with interest. I took her palm and put the key in. "This is for you. A spare key. Now you have full access to my house. I mean, to our house," I corrected myself, uncertainly. "If, of course, you want it." She looked from the key to me, her eyes widened. "Alex, are you sure?" She began, but I interrupted. "Listen," I took her other hand and squeezed it gently. "You've become a part of my life, and not just mine, but Jamie's too. I know it's been a short time, but I feel right. My son and I want you here for as long as you want. This key is a symbol. You're always welcome here." Clara's lips trembled, tears of happiness glistened in her eyes. I I don't even know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," I smiled. She laughed through her tears. "Yes, of course, yes." She dropped the key onto the carpet and hugged me tightly. I held her close, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. She lifted her face, and I leaned in to kiss her. For the first time, our lips met, not furtively, not by chance, but for real. That kiss had everything: the pain of past losses and the tenderness of new hope. When we pulled away, we were both smiling. "Welcome home," I said quietly. Clara ran her hand over my face. "Thank you, my love," she added almost silently. I closed my eyes at the word. My heart was filled with warmth. We stood for a long time in the center of the empty living room, swaying in our arms under the sunlight from the window. In this silence, I heard only the beating of our hearts, the most beautiful sound in the world. One summer evening, when the bustle of the day had died down, I settled down at the desk in the corner of the living room. The new house had long since become a cozy nest for us. Clara had finally moved in with us a couple of weeks ago, quietly, without unnecessary noise, just gradually staying overnight more and more often until she brought the last of her things. Jamie was happy. He adored Aunt Clara and almost immediately began to call her simply Clara, as if she were his own. Molly came to see her son several times. The three of them walked with her sister or grandmother, and I picked him up in the evening. My ex-wife and I maintained polite relations for the sake of the child. Fortunately, Jamie gradually got used to living with me and Clara. Of course, at first he missed his mother, but children's psyches are flexible, especially since his mother did not disappear from his life completely. Our life improved. Clara and I shared chores. Cooked together, she taught me new recipes in addition to my chili. I successfully closed the spring semester, although I had to make up for what I missed. There are still 2 years of study ahead. I decided on a specialty. I chose supply chain management because my experience working in a warehouse and service accustomed me to logistics. Now it was easier to study. There were people who loved me nearby, and I saw a goal to get a diploma for the sake of my future with my son and Clara. And now, in the summer silence, I could finally devote time to that very essay assignment with which, in fact, this chapter of my life began. I opened my laptop to a blank document. The topic had been eluding me for a long time. There was too much I wanted to say. But having lived through the last few months, I knew exactly what I wanted to write about. About silence. I began typing, slowly at first, then faster and faster, as if the words themselves were forming sentences. I wrote about how silence comes in different forms. I recalled that morning kitchen silence, saturated with unexpressed feelings and hidden threats. I described the silence of loneliness when you walk along a deserted embankment with only your own thoughts noisy in your head. I compared it to the silence in a small courtroom where two people part forever without unnecessary words. And finally, to the silence that comes when you embrace a loved one and no words are needed. Such silence speaks louder than any speech about love and understanding. Line by line, my thoughts appeared on the screen. I remembered how, long ago, I wrote down a quote during a lecture. In silence, a person hears himself. These words had not touched me deeply before. Now I understand them as never before. When we fall silent, we do not disappear, we begin to listen. And sometimes it is in silence that an important answer comes to us. I didn't immediately notice that Clara had come up and was quietly reading over her shoulder. I even felt embarrassed. "Oh, are you spying, madam?" She smiled and kissed me on the top of my head. "Sorry, I couldn't resist. It's coming out very beautifully. Such a personal thing. Are you sure you want to hand this in to the professor?" I shrugged. "Why not? It's sincere. I don't think they'll lower your grade for being sincere." Clara sat down on the armrest of the chair next to me. "There's just so much personal stuff there. About us, about your pain." I covered her hand with mine. "Everything is fine. I even want to share it. If it weren't for this task, who knows, maybe I would never have rethought all the events. And so, I feel like I'm putting a period and learning a lesson." Clara gently ran her fingers over my cheek. "I'm proud of you. You know, not everyone is capable of looking at themselves so openly." I smiled. "If I weren't capable, I wouldn't have been able to cope with all this." She nodded quietly and looked at the screen. "Can I read to the end? I'm very curious about what you're talking about." She paused and read the title out loud. "Noisy Silence. That's the title of my essay," I explained. "Or at least the concept. I'm writing that silence can be deafening. That sometimes silence screams out what people are afraid to say out loud. And conversely, in silence you can hear what the noise of the bustle drowned out." Clara smiled approvingly. "A beautiful thought. Noisy silence," she repeated. "You know, it reminds me of a famous piece of music. I think John Cage composed it, 4 minutes 33 seconds of silence." I looked at her in surprise. "Wow, where did you get such knowledge?" She laughed. "My brother was into avant-garde music. He kept nagging me about it. Seriously, he even had a recording. A pianist sitting at the piano, not making a sound, and in the hall you can only hear rustling, coughing, breathing. As a child, I didn't understand what was so special about it, but now—" She looked me in the eyes. "Now I'm starting to understand." "Me too," I said quietly. "I might even include a mention of the play in my essay. It's a great example of silence being filled with hidden meaning." Clara kissed me on the nose. "You're so smart. Okay, I won't stop you from finishing. Will you make it before the end of the week?" "Definitely," I nodded. "We'll sit down together later, edit if necessary. Your outside perspective is very valuable." Agreed. She stood up and stretched. "I'll go check on our artist and put the kettle on." She headed toward her son's room, and I looked away from the screen for a few seconds and closed my eyes. There was silence in my head, but the kind that made me feel good and at ease. I smiled to myself, cracked my fingers, and began to finish writing the final paragraphs of the essay. It was a Sunday morning, especially quiet. My family and I had breakfast and then went our separate ways. Jamie was building a city out of blocks on the carpet, quietly muttering to himself the conversations of his toy people. Clara, having taken her coffee mug, settled herself comfortably in a chair by the window with a book. I sat down on the windowsill opposite, smiling at this peaceful picture. Sunlight flooded the room, dust motes danced in the rays. Through the slightly open window came the chirping of birds in the park opposite and the distant noise of the awakening city. Neither the radio nor the television were on. No one wanted to disturb the morning peace. I closed my eyes and listened. It seemed like there was complete silence, but gradually different sounds emerged from it. The rustle of a page as Clara turned it, the clatter of the blocks in her son's hands, the quiet purring of the neighbor's cat behind the wall. Even my own breathing was clearly audible in this blessed silence. I felt every second of this moment as precious. No tension, no anxiety, only harmony. My gaze slid around the room. New photographs hung on the wall, the three of us. Me, Jamie, and Clara laughing by the river. Clara with a bucket of strawberries we had picked on the farm last summer. All three of us at the Christmas market. These pictures had replaced the old ones I had put away in the pantry. Jamie's trophies glittered on the bottom shelf certificates for his crafts from kindergarten. Next to them was my record book with the A's from my last exams. A little further on was a stack of Clara's albums, where she carefully kept the stories of how we met and how we found each other again. Our house was filled with new meanings and memories. I caught myself wondering, after all the storms, could it really be so calm? I remembered how recently silence in the house meant trouble. I remembered the oppressive silence of that dawn in the kitchen, when it seemed as if a wall had grown between me and Molly. Then the absence of words was worse than a scream. After she left, our house stood sullenly silent for many days, and this emptiness gave off pain. But step by step, I learned to fill the silence with peace and warmth again. Now a quiet morning brought not anxiety, but peace. Yes, difficulties can still happen, life is long. But now, in the quiet harbor of our home, it seemed that nothing could disturb family happiness. I met Clara's gaze. She looked up from her reading and looked at me with a gentle smile, as if sharing my thoughts. In silence, we exchanged silent confessions. Thank you for everything, I am always here. And there was no need for words, we heard and felt everything anyway. Dad, look, Jamie called out to me, looking up from his blocks. What's there, baby? I came closer. I built a city, a very quiet city. The cars don't hum there, people don't swear, everyone speaks in whispers, he said seriously, showing off his buildings. I sat down next to him and examined my son's creation. Great city, just like home, quiet and nice, right? Jamie nodded and smiled. Uh-huh, good. He was again engrossed in his game. I ruffled his soft curls and returned to the window. Clara, who had been watching our scene, closed her book and stretched. I suggest we take a walk before lunch. The park is inviting, the birds are singing. Great, I agreed. Let's take a walk in our quiet town. She laughed, and her laughter rang out like a bell in the morning silence. Jamie ran up to see what we were laughing about, and we agreed to go look at the ducks in the pond. My son clapped his hands with joy. While getting ready, I caught myself thinking that even the laughter and joy in our home are now somehow special, quiet, unobtrusive, but no less profound. We have learned to hear each other and the silence too, and this noise. Late in the evening, after a busy day, Clara and I were alone in the kitchen. Jamie had long since fallen asleep in his room, and the house was plunged into a calm silence. I had just told her that I had sent my essay to the professor and had included as an epigraph a quote about how silence is also a part of music. Clara, smiling, took out her phone. Would you like a little gift to celebrate the completion of your writing epic? Let's listen to that very cage piece I was talking about. I winked. Go ahead. I'm curious about myself. 4 minutes 33 seconds, right? She found the recording and set the timer on her phone for that segment. We turned off the light, sat down next to each other at the table, and, holding hands, froze. Not a note came from the speaker of the phone, only a light rustling, the background of the hall where the recording was taking place, and the occasional cough of someone from the audience. We sat silently, listening. It was night around us. Cars occasionally drove past the window. Our son snored in his sleep in the apartment. The cooling stove crackled. I felt the warmth of Clara's palm and heard our even breathing. The beating of my heart measured, confident, intertwined with this silence. Nearby, almost synchronously, the heart of my beloved woman beat. I remembered all those moments when silence in my life meant more than any words. Here I am, standing alone on the dark deck of a ship in the middle of the ocean night, listening to the splash of the waves and looking at the countless stars. Here I am silently shedding tears in the cold rain, having learned of my wife's betrayal. Here I am, gritting my teeth, frozen in tension, waiting for the judge's decision in a stuffy courtroom, not daring to exhale. And here I am holding the hand of my beloved woman, and the silence around us is gentle, like a warm blanket. All these sounds and silences merged into one common motif, like in that play by Cage where there is not a single note, but there is a special music of life. The timer rang softly, counting down 4:33. We exchanged glances in the semi-darkness. I pressed stop on my phone, but the noise didn't really increase. We simply allowed the normal sounds to exist without drowning them out. Clara was the first to break the silence. You know, unexpectedly beautiful. The silence really is like music. I nodded. Yes, and my new favorite melody is this one. 4 minutes 33 seconds of peace. I wouldn't have believed I'd say that before. She pressed her head against my shoulder. I'm glad you're doing well now. Me too, I replied, hugging her. We sat for a while longer, hugging each other, without turning on the light, enjoying the moment. Eventually, we got up and walked quietly down the hall to the bedroom so as not to disturb my son's sleep. As I lay down, I noticed pale moonlight pouring in through the slightly open window. The silence still sounded in my head, not frightening, but cozy. Images of the past day, week, year floated before my closed eyes. And before falling asleep, I thanked fate for everything it had given me, including the lesson to appreciate silence. After all, sometimes it is in silence that we truly hear the most important things. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.